Samsharadava Pranaya Karuna Ghana Ghanatyam Sapta Sakalana Gunarnavasha Bande Gura Sri Charanarabindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Baditramadyanmana Sorasena Ramanchakam Pasutaranga Bhajo Bande Gurasi Charanarabindam Sansharadava Loka Pranaya Karuna Ghana Ghanatyam Sapta Sakalana Gunarnavasha Bande Gura Sri Charanarabindam.
So some of the service that I've done since I joined the movement was I headed up the women, the traveling Sankirtan party and the women's Sankirtan. I opened a preaching center along with other devotees, but I headed up. That was in Las Vegas, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and also in El Paso, as well as in South Africa, opening up a preaching center. And then when actually I came to Arizona, the devotees said, "You won't last the first summer here because it's really a kind of a tough place. But somehow or other, through hard work, diligence, and steadfast determination, you know, here we've been here 35, 36 years, and we have a flourishing community. We have a Govinda's restaurant that's in operation going on 30 years. So, you know, of course I cook, I head up the kitchen, I manage that, I manage our boutique. Probably been to India 60 times, you know, purchasing for the boutique. Also, we started a temple in Phoenix. There wasn't anything up there. And we started a temple that's a, you know, very big temple now. So, you know, throughout my devotional service, I was able to do, you know, a lot of different services that aren't, quote, you know, a women's role. And so many people benefited from that. So I would like to see every woman in our movement, every woman that comes, to be able to, you know, do to her heart's content any service that she wants to please Srila Prabhupada and to help push on this movement. I got a lot of opportunities. I was held back a little bit, but more or less I got a lot of opportunities. But that was a different era. And now it's not as available as it was before. So I'd really like to see that happen. As a woman in ISKCON, I've experienced a lot of different things, as you can imagine. Really the best and some of the worst. The worst meaning that even though I myself was always given opportunity to do whatever service that I wanted to do, and try to excel at that. I was never really held back because I had good leadership. I was under Badrinarayan Swami, and he was very good. And I was able to, you know, do everything I wanted to do. But I saw my god sisters who weren't that fortunate, and they felt that their creativity, their expertise that they had was not being utilized. Not only not being utilized, but it was really practically condemned, held back, and not given a chance to fully come to, you know, what they felt they could give to the movement and give to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada initiated 1,500 lady disciples, and so many of them have left the movement due to not being able to get facility, not being able to utilize their propensity, feeling discarded, in many cases insulted, abused, and they just couldn't take it anymore, and they left. And that is such a great disservice to the whole world, because so rare to have a devotee. And the devotees that came during that time, the 60s and the 70s, very precious and personal association with Srila Prabhupada. So, you know, for that expertise, that talent, that love, that devotion, to just flitter away because of the bad management it's pitiful, actually. So many women now in the West, they're college graduate, they're intelligent, they've, themselves run businesses, have degrees, have so much variety of service that they've done. So they come here to ISKCON, to find the greatest philosophy, certainly the greatest food, the greatest association, and then they hear that women aren't in very many managing positions, and the highest managing position, which is a spiritual position, which is guru, that there isn't even one. So that really disheartens them, and it really discourages them from continuing in their exposure of Krishna consciousness and their willingness and their enthusiasm to continue. Even though they may love so many things about our philosophy, our movement, who can deny that it's the best? But then when they see that repeatedly in many different factors, then they become unenthusiastic, and some of them step away and they don't go further in their spiritual life. The fact that a lot of young women aren't joining because of the discrimination that they see, even though they try to be chaste and understanding and humble, all these things, really it comes out, so therefore we don't have many of the young people young girls in our movement. So therefore there's not that many young guys. Actually, Hridayananda Maharaj told me this funny story that when he was 6, his parents had a birthday party for him. And when he found out that they only invited the boys and not the girls, he said, "Who's gonna come? Without the girls, the boys won't come." So, of course, our devotion is to Krishna, our focus is to Krishna, but if we have a very unnatural balance there, then the men, generally everyone gets married, let's face it, 95% get married. So they join the movement, boys join, and there's no qualified ladies. What do? They go out and find a karmi, and then you don't see them anymore. It's so bad. So, we need to encourage women, and how are we going to do that? We have to have something that when they come, they can look up to and think, this is what I can do. I can follow this path. If I have that proclivity, I can manage. I can manage a temple. I can manage a project. And if spiritually, somehow or other, I'm qualified and need be, I can become a guru. When I joined the movement in '75 in San Diego, it was a big house and it was a big family. The men and women did everything together. We went on the van together on Harinam, we preached together, we cooked together, we did everything together. And it was a very sweet mood, and there wasn't any kind of that dichotomy of, women in the back, women over here. And, there was just a lot of respect. It was just like, we were like brothers and sisters. And so therefore the movement was flourishing. We had to keep moving out of our places because we were getting too many devotees for the space. So, and it was growing and it was really fun. And generally my god sisters that I am in touch with that are still in the movement, we talk about those, really sweet, good times that we had, that it was like one big happy family. And, I miss that, and I feel bad for some of the devotees that join now, and they don't have that because there's like a lot of separatism, and they don't feel they have the same opportunity. Luckily, because I was raised in that kind of smaller atmosphere, we all felt empowered, and but unfortunately it changed over the years, and now sometimes it's not even recognizable in some places. The qualities, the general qualities of women that are shy, chaste, submissive, those are all great qualities. But the men, unfortunately, have taken advantage of that. And they've taken some of Srila Prabhupada's glorious scriptures and his words and, turned them a little bit, twisted them a little bit, and used them against women to try to uplift themselves, or to try to use that as an excuse for their inadequacy, frankly. And one thing women have, like it explains in the 10th canto, the 10th chapter, Opulence of the Absolute, one of the female qualities is patience. But really, how patient can we be? We've been patient. we've been more patient, we've been most patient, but really this issue's been going on for decades, a long time, and really it's high time. You know, it's a new century, you know, women are, you know, leaders everywhere in the world, you know, they're taking up, you know, big leadership positions, spiritual positions in the, you know, major religions of the world. So why is it that, you know, we're stuck in this way? And it doesn't have anything to do with chastity or submissiveness. You know, women can be very graceful, and they are under all circumstances. And it's not that if a few women get to initiate, all of a sudden they're going to become unchaste, insubmissive, and rowdy and rebel rousers and so many things. It's, you know, it's a gift given to us by Lord Chaitanya, by Srila Prabhupada, and we want to try to, you know, live up to that. We want to try to fulfill that. There's that frustration there because we know it's an order from Srila Prabhupada, from Lord Chaitanya. You know, we want to preach, and when we do preach and they become interested, then they say, great, where's the women I can take initiation from? And then as soon as you tell them, well, maybe, sort of, kind of, many years, it's on the back burner, you know, you see their face just like totally become like they're aghast when they hear that, and it doesn't make sense to them in their intelligent, rational mind that, you know, here's such a wonderful movement with such an amazing philosophy and such a long history, and why is it like this?
Currently, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been practicing for 5 years, and I work as a psychotherapist with families, youth, and children. And prior to that, I was a medical social worker, providing social work services to kids with complicated medical conditions. I didn't have too much spiritual interest during that time of my life. Although I did have religion in my background growing up, I really abandoned that as an adult and began to really seek the meaning of life through all the 3 modes, you know, very thoroughly, exploring different ways to feel meaning in my life and to make meaning out of my life. I didn't have a belief in a higher power or God or any conception of that at that time, so it was really just kind of an individual search to see if within myself I could make meaning out of my life. So as I mentioned, as an undergraduate, I studied such a variety of philosophies, you know, seeking, philosophy of freedom, philosophy of psychology, of science, of philosophy of consciousness studies, of the mind, always hoping to find that meaning in life. And, you know, just with each class I was disappointed to not get the answers that I was really seeking. So the first time that I came to a Sunday program was really just on a whim. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I had actually been eating at Govinda's for about 12 years, and somehow I didn't realize there was a temple, but actually I probably wouldn't have had any interest in going. So that first night, it was a Sunday feast, and right away there was chanting, and I began to experience emotions and feelings that were something new to me and completely fulfilling. There was just a complete satisfaction in hearing the chanting and hearing the Maha Mantra. Really quite took me by surprise. But the Sunday feast, she did say, hello, nice that you came again. And again, I didn't know who she was, but then I quickly began to know that she was our temple president, and wow, that was really big to me, that there was a woman here, a woman in a leadership role, that meant the world to me. So I'm sure there was a talk that night, you know, for sure, undoubtedly there was a talk that night. I don't really remember what it is that I heard, and I probably didn't understand too much about it, but I was driven to come back. And very shortly after that, you know, it was really kind of a miracle. I just began to understand little bits and pieces of the philosophy, and suddenly God was again in my life. And I had no doubt that there was God and that I was a soul. I mean, these were just amazing feelings because I'd, you know, claimed to myself that I was maybe an atheist, and suddenly I knew God was real. It was a miracle. So there are some, you know, kind of quirky ways of doing things here in ISKCON where, you know, there's a pretty significant division between men and women, and men go first for this, and so that's definitely noticeable. Thank goodness that the individual relationships that I've been able to develop with some of the devotees have kind of minimized any of my concerns about discrimination, here at our temple. However, I'm very interested in system issues, and I don't know how it just got on my radar so quickly that women do not initiate, and then there's this unending controversy about that. It causes a lot of cognitive dissonance for me. I hear this absolute truth, this we are not our body, yet I'm just continuously reminded that I'm in a woman's body. So that cognitive dissonance is very fatiguing. It drains energy that could otherwise be devoted to listening and comprehending and understanding our amazing philosophy. That's something that I and many women are experiencing. So one concern that I've had since coming to ISKCON is, while I have, really gone through a distressing process of trying to make peace with the absolute truth in one hand, and then the archaic procedures or policies in ISKCON, is I'm very concerned about other women and young men that might want to join our movement. These issues need to be resolved in order to continue to attract people. I'm just very concerned that people are not going to come here, or if they do come, they're not going to stay. I also would like to say that it's something that is an ongoing challenge for me. Is I want to bring people to Krishna consciousness, but I really don't know how to talk about these issues that we're experiencing in ISKCON. I really don't know what to say about this. I mean, there's just really no justification in our culture in this day and age to justify some of the policies that ISKCON continues.
Srila Prabhupada wrote many books, Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, but the mature experience of his years in beginning this movement were contained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. That was primarily his last literary work. So I'd like to read a couple of excerpts from the Chaitanya Charitamrita that are relevant to today's ceremony. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Adi Leela, chapter 7, verse 31 and 32, "Not knowing that boys and girls in countries like Europe and America mix very freely, these fools and rascals criticize the boys and girls in Krishna consciousness for intermingling. But these rascals should consider that one cannot suddenly change a community's social customs." The poet said, "East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet." But in Srila Prabhupada, they have met. But that doesn't mean they meet always very easily. For example, Srila Prabhupada writes that a candidate for Krishna consciousness in the Western countries should be taught about the renunciation of material existence. But one would teach candidates from a country like India in a different way. The teacher, Acharya, has to consider time, candidate, and country. He must avoid the principle of niyamagraha, that is, he should not try to perform the impossible. What is possible in one country may not be possible in another. You remember that Srila Prabhupada heard this word once on a morning walk, impossible. When printing the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he wanted it done in 2 months, and the book production manager, Rameshwar Prabhu, blurted out, "Impossible." To which Prabhupada famously said, what? "Impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary." And yet Prabhupada is using it to describe trying to impose cultural values in one part of the world that are not native to that part of the world. So herein he explains was his success in doing what no one else had been able to do, bring people to Krishna consciousness from all different walks of life. So in Prabhupada's physical absence, we are still wrestling with exactly how that can be done. And one of the biggest challenges after Prabhupada's departure is who would carry on the disciplic succession. I was present in 1975 in Mayapur when Srila Prabhupada once said that he wanted 10 million acharyas in ISKCON. Well, so far we have 80. Ways to go. But the The question has been perplexing Prabhupada's followers, because when he was with us, he was the one and only guru. Everything was very simple. Sureshwar, Sundamani and I all remember those very blissful, simple days. Everybody was Prabhupada's disciple. And all you needed was the recommendation of the temple president who would accept you. Many of our God brothers and God sisters never saw Srila Prabhupada. They never met him. But they had faith, and through that faith they became Krishna conscious. So we are now experiencing how these cultural differences can impact us and making adjustments for them as we are moving this forward in Krishna consciousness. So in India, when Srila Prabhupada was here, the movement was very embryonic. Now it is massive. There's amazing, huge temples all over the country, more than 100. And in the West, where everything was burgeoning in the early days, things have been slower, more of a struggle. So the Eastern side feels that our success in spreading Krishna consciousness has been because we stick to the conservative, traditional values. And this appeals in India, where the audience is almost exclusively of Hindu descent. India is becoming very westernized. And so those with more character and culture want to hold on to the traditional values. They appreciate ISKCON for that reason. But in the West, if we start with these traditional values, people will feel it is impossible. It's impossible for me to so completely change my life. So we do what Prabhupada did on 26 2nd Avenue in Manhattan. We just say, add Krishna to your life. You don't have to make so many dramatic changes. Just add Krishna to your life. This is in the line of Rupa Goswami, who said, Yena tena prakarina mana Krishna naveshaya. Just somehow or other think about Krishna. The rules and regulations can come later. You remember Prabhupada initiated his first group of disciples and had not even told them about the 4 regular principles. After the initiation, one of them asked Srila Prabhupada, now that we're initiated, are there any rules? To which Srila Prabhupada said, I'm very glad you are finally asking me that question. So now we are going along. We have clear guidelines for initiating. We have clear guidelines for who can give initiation. 20 years ago, one of Srila Prabhupada's female disciples approached the governing body commission about giving initiation. Srila Prabhupada said before his departure that I do not trust any one of you, but I trust all of you collectively. So he left the movement in the hands not of any individual, but of a committee, the governing body commission. Now there's a great advantage to having a committee in charge, and that is things don't change too fast. And there's a great disadvantage to having a committee in charge, which is that things don't change too fast. It's like steering the Titanic to get any little movement in ISKCON. So in about 2001, one lady approached the GBC. I have devotees who are asking me to give them initiation. May I do so? And the GBC has a policy that when somebody is approaching them for this purpose, they take 6 months to consider. In this particular devotee's case, they took 10 years. And then they decided no. Now why did they take so long? Because there was a tremendous amount of objection, primarily from devotees in India. And they were feeling, traditionally, we have male gurus, having female gurus would be too, it would make us look too compromised to appeal to our Hindu audience here in India. We can understand, it's understandable. But then on the Western side, the devotees were saying, in our culture, there's gender equity. Looking on women as less than men is considered ignorant by almost everybody. And those who don't consider it ignorant will have very little interest in our movement. So, 10 years later, another lady approached the GBC, same situation. I have young devotees who'd like to take initiation from me. The DVC said, okay, we will take that under consideration. So 4 years passed, they're still thinking about it. And the leaders in North America met and sent a request to the GBC, if you don't want to let women initiate everywhere in ISKCON, please at least in North America. And the GBC said, we will consider that. So in 2018, they finally had a vote. Because the feelings were so strong, east and west, the GBC resolved by a strong majority, we will let each part of the world make their own decision on this contentious issue. Okay? And the Westerners said, that is fine, we are perfectly happy with that. But the devotees in India said, no, we think that's wrong and it should be different in East and West. So the GBC said, we are sticking with our resolution, but we'll give you some time to discuss and see what amendments you want to make to it. So that has been going on, and it's still going on until right now. Should be finished any time now. Just now coming. Meanwhile, there are very wonderful God sisters of ours, disciples of Srila Prabhupada, who have people who want to take initiation from them, who have left this world. One lady particularly, Mother Jamuna, actually Jamuna Prabhu, excuse me. I once called her Mother Jamuna, and she said, yes, Father Kalakam. Because she was there with Prabhupada in the early days, and Prabhupada addressed his female disciples as Prabhu. He learned deity worship from Shilavati Prabhu, Malati Prabhu. And then all the devotees know this. And why did he do that? Because he could understand the cultural values in the society in which he was presenting Krishna consciousness. And it was adopted because the Acharya can do that. So she has left us, one very, very wonderful person. And recently Mother Krishna Nandini, who also had aspiring disciples, she was applying to initiate, but she succumbed to cancer. And so we have lost two of these great luminaries. Fortunately, there are still some left. The clock has not run out. And all of you here in Tucson are very, very, very fortunate to have such a person here with you. Do you prefer Prabhu or Mother? Okay, well, Mother Sandhavani? Is Mother's Day? This is another debate. You know, should you call women Prabhu or Mother? There's only one correct answer to that, which is whatever they want. You call them what they want. So, Mother Sandhamani has been here developing this wonderful temple for 36 years. And before that, she was doing sterling service in other temples, San Diego, other places, book distribution, preaching, serving Srila Prabhupada heart and soul without restriction, without compromise. And we really have to ask ourselves, if there's discussion about the qualifications of a guru in our society, in our Sangha, what more could Mother Sandhamani do? And she's given her entire adult life to Srila Prabhupada's service. She has kept her initiation vows. She has been very productive and successful and compassionate and giving of herself to all of you and so many devotees in this movement. What more can she give? Is there any question of qualification of such a person to represent Srila Prabhupada in the Sacred Succession? So she had the opportunity to just go ahead and give initiation to her aspiring disciple. But being a good, loyal follower of the GBC, she said, no, I don't want to go rogue. And so she asked me to sit in. We are technically not in the rhythmic camp, but although I'm officially authorized to give initiations at ISKCON, I'm really just sitting here to assist in this guru accepting a disciple under the auspices of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So, Michelle, when you're taking this vow, this very big step in life, I will give you one instruction, okay? All right. So, Mother Sandami, we appreciate you so much. Thank you very much for all you've done for Srila Prabhupada. Would you like to say a few words?
Hare Krishna. So, of course, a devotee always feels that they're not qualified. So, I also feel that way. But it's actually an insult to Srila Prabhupada to feel after 45 years of practicing Krishna consciousness that someone doesn't know enough to help another person go back to Godhead. So in that sense, I am qualified, along with so many other devotees all over the world. And as Kalakanta, I believe, coined that we want, how does it go, hundreds?
That we have dozens of gurus with thousands of disciples.
Yeah, we want the opposite. So we know that Lord Chaitanya, we know that Srila Prabhupada wanted all of us to become guru. So what does that mean? That means to give someone Krishna consciousness, to encourage them in their spiritual life. And there's many Shiksha gurus, and many of us are Shiksha gurus for each other, but one has to take formal initiation to be into the disciplic succession, to link us up with Srila Prabhupada, to Bhakti Siddhanta, to the disciplic succession all the way up to Shri Krishna. So, you know, it's a very humbling service, and I actually didn't think about it. I definitely did not think about it, except Michelle, such a sincere devotee, comes from a very professional Western background and thought, this is absurd. That how can this wonderful movement with so many amazing devotees, the best philosophy in the world, not have women gurus, even one? It doesn't make any sense. So because she was so sincere, she didn't just give up and think, the heck with this. You know, I already dealt with the hypocrisy in so many ways in my work field and also in my other religions and different spiritual paths that I tried to pursue. So what's the difference here? But because Krishna's in her heart and she's very sincere, she hung on and just tried to work with the system. And she did work with the system. She wrote a wonderful letter to our GBC chairman. She wrote a letter to our local GBC just expressing her situation. And now when she came to the temple, she was nurtured by the ladies, she was encouraged by the ladies, and she naturally wanted to take initiation. And the reply came back, thank you very much, but not yet, wait a little longer, we're not sure about this. You know, keep on chanting. But there's a saying that something can get rotten on the vine. So the beautiful fruit is there, but if it doesn't get picked, it just slowly shrivels up. So, not that Michelle was shriveling up, but I didn't want to take the chance that she would in some way become disappointed or go away, because unfortunately many have done that. Not just the women, the men too, but because of this issue, some of my god sisters aren't involved. Very talented, very intelligent, so much experience, and they distance themselves from the movement because of, you know, situations like this where women weren't given the proper respect and facility that the men were given. Some of us are just like dogged that, you know, no matter what, we won't go. So I'm in that category. So so this is a wonderful honor for me, and it's really an honor to have Kalakanta here, and of course Sureshwar Guru, you know, very supportive senior god brothers that, you know, have this proper vision and is encouraging me and all the women of the movement. So I have a lot of hope, I have a lot of faith that things will change. But we're just slightly jumping the gun, just slightly, with the auspices of ISKCON doing this. So this is a very exciting day for me personally and for our temple. and we will get on with the sacred ceremony. So what are the four regulated principles that you
वृत्तस्तथा भावत एव सद्भिः साक्षादरीतेन समस्तशास्त्रैः वृत्तस्तथा भावत एव सद्भिः किन्तु प्रभुः प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरस्य चरणारविन्दम् प्रभो प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरस्य चरणारविन्दम् संसारधामानललितलोक प्राणाय कारुण्य घनाघनत्यम् सकलनगुणार्णवश वन्दे गुरश्री चरणारविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसाद यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसाद यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि गायं स्तुवं तस्य यशस्वी सन्धं गायं स्तुवं तस्य यशस्वी सन्धं वन्दे गुरश्री चरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरश्री चरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरश्री चरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरश्री चरणारविन्दम् संसारतापानलनिरलोक ज्ञानाय कारुण्य घनाघनत्यम् भक्तस्य कल्याणगुणार्णवश वन्दे गुरश्री चरणारविन्दम् 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 प्राणाय कारुण्य घनाघनतम् तपस कल्लन गुणानवश वन्दे गुरश्री चरणारविन्दम्
For the past 20 years, ISKCON leaders have been debating whether or not women could give initiation. This is surprising because Prabhupada's statements were quite explicit on the subject. He wrote a letter saying that all of his sons and daughters could take disciples. Now, some very learned leaders in our movement have objected, well, this is just a letter, it doesn't have the same weight as books. But in the ISKCON Guru Initiation Policy Statement from the Guru Services Committee, most of the references are Prabhupada's letters. So I don't understand why some letters are conclusive, but that one is not. Another factor in this debate has been the question of East and West. The temples in India, the Indian Bureau particularly, has been adamantly opposed to the GBC's compromise resolution, letting each individual part of the world decide for themselves whether or not women can initiate. Now, the exception for the Indian leadership includes those leaders such as Gopal Krishna Maharaj, Jayapataka Maharaj, our dearly departed Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Devotees, in other words, with an international portfolio who have experience in multiple countries in diverse audiences. They have spoken in favor of Vaishnavas being allowed to give Diksha. As a preacher in the West, it's not even a question for me. The gender equity that Prabhupada engaged in the early days of ISKCON is what made the movement grow. When I joined, when most of his disciples joined, there was a wonderful sense of equity and brotherhood and sisterhood amongst the young devotees that was very appealing. And that's what drew people in. Now, we're discovering that if we apply that principle today, that of Samadarshina, seeing people as spirit souls and not by their bodily designations, the same magic happens. People from non-Hindu backgrounds will take tremendous interest in Krishna consciousness. This is why having a few Vaishnavi Diksha Gurus, some but not many, will make a huge difference in ISKCON's impact in the West. I am, for one, so grateful that the GBC had the wisdom to see the importance of allowing individual parts of the world to make their own decisions on this matter. Srila Prabhupada wrote in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that to try to impose cultural values from one part of the world on another is impossible. We know that's a word that Prabhupada did not like, but he used it himself in his purport in describing this phenomenon that we have been suffering through in the West for the past couple of decades. Our need, our cultural need to have gender equity is not contrary to Vedic principles, because the highest Vedic principle is sharing Krishna consciousness with other living entities. Rupa Goswami said, Yena tena prakarina mana Krishna naveshayat. Somehow or other think about Krishna, the rules and regulations can come later. That's why Vaishnavi Diksha Gurus are important, because that will help people in the West think about Krishna, accept Krishna, be open to Krishna consciousness, whereas a patriarchal, male-first society will immediately turn them off. Not only the women, but the men. There are various philosophical arguments. The Bharaj Samhita, for example, has been cited because it says one should not accept a woman as a guru. It also says one should not accept a man from a low-class background as a guru. But then at the end of the passage, it says, however, if a person is a devotee of Krishna, is a pure devotee of Krishna, it doesn't matter what their background is or what their gender is. So that is very consistent with what Srila Prabhupada taught us. In the debate in ISKCON about Vaishnavi Diksha Gurus, mostly the temples in India opposed, mostly the temples in many parts of the West were in favor. So the GBC made a decision. Individual areas can make their own determination about whether women initiate or not. The devotees in the western side said that's fine with us. But the devotees in India, for some reason, have been fighting. Not all, but many of the leaders have been fighting this GBC compromise. Srila Prabhupada said that the theme of our movement is unity in diversity. I can't think of a better way to express that than in this decision by the GBC. The same cultural values are not going to fit all over the world. And we can say that Varnashram culture is meant for the world. Well, that's fine. Why do we have to start with implementing it on the women? Why not start with some big political leaders? Or why not get the men in shape first? You know, the reason in the West that women have to be more assertive than in India or other parts of the world is because the men are so rotten. The men are irresponsible, they're exploitive, they are immoral, and so the women are left to fend for themselves. So you say to a woman like that, who's been through this whole experience her whole life, well, now you have to be this chaste, shy, submissive person. It's not going to work. It's simply going to turn people away and make them look at ISKCON like some kind of archaic relic from a museum. We need to do what Prabhupada did, which was to accept everybody lovingly and appreciate any little spark of interest they had in Krishna consciousness. That still works. It worked for Srila Prabhupada, it works today. This is why we need some, but not many, women in this role of highest spiritual leadership in our movement. It is amazing to me how any women have survived what they have been through since Srila Prabhupada's departure in this movement. What men could go through the ignominy that has been visited on the women in this movement? Being told that they're inferior, being told that they're second class, being denied service opportunities regardless of their nature, being told when they're young to abandon the Varnashram principles and go out and sell books, the furthest thing you can imagine from the ideal chaste Vedic woman, but set all that aside and go out and preach. But then when their grandmothers say, oh, you should observe the Varnashram tradition now and just tend to your grandchildren. You see the hypocrisy. What man could tolerate that kind of abuse? It is amazing to me. These women who have stuck it out all these years have shown incredible devotion for Srila Prabhupada.